factor of 1.3 if the calculation results in a weight factor of less than 1.3. So as you can see in the slide, this is how it's being calculated. So determine as necessary how the funding formula may be clarified and revised to ensure full participation of contracting parties and provide clarity on the funding process. So the formula is a weight factor times the number of eligible Indian students. So you have the weight factor of the state average over the national. And if it's 1.3 or higher, that's what we use. But if the weight factor is less than 1.3, we'd use 1.3 for the weight factor. Again, this data is from the U.S. Department of Education from prior year. And then on the next slide, it's going to plug in some numbers so that way you can see more clearly on how it's being factored. So the weight factor times the number of eligible students, again, the weight state average over the national. And so in the example, the state average per pupil operating cost is $11,500. The national average per pupil operating cost is $13,000. So you're going to take the $11,000 over the $13,000, and it's going to give you a 0.88. So as we discussed earlier, if it's less than 1.3, then we're going to use the 1.3 as the weight factor. And in this example, it's a 0.88, so we'll use the 1.3. So if there were 500 eligible students, the funding will equal 1.3 times 500,000. It'll give you 650. And then on the next slide, is an example of, or shows you what the 1.3 weight factor currently being used, what those calculations are if we were to use the 400 students, 500 students, 600 students times the 1.3, and gives you those numbers out to the right. And the same if we were to use 1.4 with the same number of eligible students. And the same for 1.5 by using the same number of eligible students. So this is just an example of how to compare the 1.3 to the 1.4 and 1.5. And then on the next slide, it's the hold harmless provision. The JOM Modernization Act includes a hold harmless provision that remains in effect for 4 years, which state that any existing contracting party may not receive an amount that is less than the amount that the party received for the fiscal year preceding the date of enactment of the Act. After expiration of the 4 years, the Act provides that no contractor may receive more than a 10% decrease from the amount received in the prior year. BIE is not able to recommend a new funding formula without decreasing the funds made available to existing contracting parties. After 4 years, it is possible that existing contractors may receive reductions in funding even beyond the FY 2017 levels. The BIE welcomes comments on this matter for any recommendations on how to revise the funding formula proposed in the rule to support all existing contracting parties receiving funding for JOM programs. For 4 fiscal years following the date of enactment of the JOM Modernization Act, which was December 31st, 2018, existing contractors will not receive an amount that is less than the amount received for fiscal year 2017, unless the existing contractor fails to submit a complete annual report, the Secretary has found that the existing contractor has violated the terms of the contract under this part, or the number of eligible students reported in the annual report has decreased below the number of eligible students served by the existing contractor in fiscal year 2017. No existing contractor will receive the amount of funding per eligible student that is less than the amount of funding per eligible Indian student that the existing contractor received for fiscal year 2017. Beginning December 31st, 2022, 4 years after the December 31st, 18 date of enactment of the JOM Modernization Act, no contracting party will receive for a fiscal year more than a 10% decrease in funding per eligible Indian student from the previous year. And that is the whole harmless provision.
Thank you, Angela. Moving on to the third topic, proposed rule and other reconciliation and modernization. I recommend that you take a look at the BIE JOM webpage to see a full version of the proposed rule. In this section, we will be highlighting some of the changes, but we will not be showing the full version of the proposed rule on the PowerPoint slide. And also, earlier in the webinar, we had stated that the rule has not been updated since 1975. So as a result, there's a lot of updating in terms of format. So one of the formatting changes was the question and answer format. So if you look at the proposed rule, you'll notice in each section, it starts off with a question, and then it provides a narrative for each of the questions and sections. The terminology has been updated. For example, BIE titles have changed. BIE became its own bureau since 1975. It was BIA. So there's a lot of BIE titles that have been updated. We've even had a recent reorganization that also changed some titles and positions and offices. So those have been updated. There are a lot of new definitions that have been added. There's a section in the proposed rule that lists all of the new terms, all of the new definitions. So for example, a new definition is academic, or a new term that was added was academic year, approving official, awarding official, or updated definitions to these terms: contracting party, scope of work, public school district, local Indian committee, eligible entity, contractor, contract. So you can take a look at that in the full version. There are some sections that were also carried over in the proposed rule. So in some sections, there have been no changes. There have been revisions. Some of those are listed on the slide. You see, for example, 273.134, a timeline for approval of a contract decision has been extended from 60 days to 90 days. 273.131, as an example, deletes the February 1st deadline for request to contract. The next slide shares other new sections. 273.104 adds to a section to determine the interest in expanding geographic coverage and enhancing JOM participation. Point 120 to 121 discusses the approval of an education plan by BIE. 154 to 155 talks about reports, when they are due, and the consequences of not submitting reports. 156 through 158 discusses technical assistance regarding the reporting requirements. 191 to 192 discusses the renewal of JOM contracts. Section 273.194 talks about the authority of the Indian Education Committee, specifically their role in canceling contracts or the ability to recommend the canceling of a contract. And point 207 to 209 discusses dispute resolution and appeals. And again, those are examples of proposed rule, new additions and revisions. It's not the full version. Please go to the bie.edu/JOM webpage to see the full version of the proposed rule. There is a link on the page. The next slide shows some questions that may help you think about different topics or sections or questions that you might be able to provide comments on. It's not an exhaustive list, it's just some talking points. For a few seconds before moving on. And then now we're getting to the end of our presentation. For additional information, you can go to the bie.edu/JOM webpage. You can also go to the BIA.gov web link provided and click on Johnson O'Malley. At the beginning of the presentation, we stated that we welcome your comments, and the comments for the proposed rule are due August 26th, 2019. You can email those comments to consultation@bia.gov. You can also go to the regulations.gov web link, search for JOM, and submit comments. After the deadline for the comments have passed, some of the next steps are to review the comments, make changes as appropriate, publish a final rule in the Federal Register, and then just noting here that the final rule will not become effective for at least 30 days after publication. The final rule is due December 31st, 2019. So at this time, I'm going to see if I can unmute everyone. Okay. And we will open it up for comments, questions, recommendations. You can also type a question in the chat box. We can also go back to a slide if you want us to review it again and clarify any points that we made. I see some folks are muted. I'm not sure if you had a question. If you're trying to talk and we don't hear you, please send me a chat message in the chat box. Let me look at the chat box here. Thank you, Ms. Saw. Your question is, define Indian student eligibility for member of a tribe, such as, does the student need to be enrolled in a tribe? Does the student be a member, is a member because of lineage? And if so, is there a form? Is the student a member by indication with a census number? Okay. Let me read that one more time. It's about eligibility requirements. Does the student need to be enrolled in a tribe? Is the student a member from lineage? Is there a form? If so, is the student a member by a census number? Okay. I'm going to go back to the slide.
Maureen, this is Brenda. I would just say that an individual is a member of a tribe if that's defined by the tribe, if you're a member of a federally recognized tribe. So in terms of whether someone is a member because of lineage, or if there's a form, or student is a member by indication of a census number, I'm not, if that's your questions of how one is a member of a tribe, I would say that that's a question for that pertains to individual tribal membership requirements.
And I think we all realize that each tribe has their own criteria. So they may have
a question.
Ms. Saw, did that answer your question? If you cannot, if we're not hearing you, please type in the chat box, but I believe I unmuted everyone. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Are there any slides that you would like us to review again? So just to review, we looked at the proposed eligibility, the proposed definition of eligible Indian student. We looked at the funding formula. And then we also looked at the proposed rule, some of the changes, some of the additions. Okay, I'm seeing someone typing in. Okay. So a comment from Ms. Zaw. So the student just needs to show their membership card based on their tribe they are enrolled with. And I would say if they meet the membership eligibility and the tribe has issued them some kind of membership identification, then that would suffice. Angela, do you want to add how that's kept at the local level?
Well, some tribes that I have noticed that whenever I went out to review some, is that they had those on file in each child's file. Now, if the child was accepted based off of descendancy, then that child had their parent's birth certificate in the file along with their membership. So that way it showed that they did meet the qualifications. And that was on file at one tribe. Another tribe, what they did was the school, whenever they collected the information, there was a software that they used where they uploaded the information, and the tribe was able to get that information and see that they qualified, so that way they knew how much, as far as the funding process from the school, from the tribe to the school, knew how much they were to give the school based off of their count. So those were a couple of ways that I have seen. Now, I did get an email one day this week requesting information off of a citizenship form now, or a membership form. However, that membership form did not have a degree of blood stated on it. And so one of the things that not only myself, but the Oklahoma Area Education Office folks up there we talked about that, and we said that they needed to, if you happen to get something like that, you will need to contact that tribe that that student is enrolled member of to make sure that they don't have a degree requirement, or if they offer descendancy. So that would be at the responsibility of the program to reach out and do some research on that.
Any follow-up questions, Ms. Zaw?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear
Hi,
you.
this is Ms. Ba. So I was just calling about the membership enrolled, I guess needing clarification as far as, so like Title VI, Title VII, they use their own form indicating that parent is a that is needed, stating that there's some type of learning, or can we use the Title VI, Title VII form indicating that the child is part of a tribe, but they're just not enrolled yet to be counted on the student count?
So the current wording based on the 91 memorandum from Interior that says eligibility for JOM services is the student must be a member of a tribe, or at least 1/4 degree Indian blood descendant of a member of an Indian tribe. So they would have to show one or the other. They would have to show membership or the 1/4 degree Indian blood descendant of a member of an Indian tribe.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is definition of being a member. I can have a parent come in, say, yes, this is my child. Yes, there are part of this tribe, but I have not enrolled the child to get their census. I'm very familiar with the Navajo Nation and how we do that. So the child will get a census number. But if the parent says, yeah, my child is in there, but I would rather have them enrolled with a different tribe, then that's where I'm trying to ask, like, what defines a member? Do they need to say letterhead Navajo Nation? This child is a member, but they're not enrolled?
Hi, this is Clint, BIE Chief of Staff. And so really it's up to the tribe to determine their own membership. Navajo Nation has certain qualifications and eligibility requirements as compared to, say, Choctaw Nation. For the purposes of this webinar and consultation, as well as updating the program, what we're trying to find is if you have comments that, are there issues that are affecting students' eligibility requirements that you think should be reformed a certain way to ensure that students have eligibility under the program. So if tribal enrollment is restrictive, maybe that's a comment you want to provide and say and tell us that that's inhibited students from being able to participate in the program. Or okay, maybe certain eligibility may be too lax in your opinion. So that's up to you, but that's okay, the type of feedback we're looking for.
Okay. Yeah, I will put that then in the feedback. I guess to get the more definition of a child being a member. I don't know if that would be part of this or...
Yeah, and as the federal government, we're not trying to stipulate how tribes determine their citizenship or membership. We just need to create a baseline for how we'll have eligibility under the program. So we'll leave it up to tribes to determine their own membership for their own people.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Also would like to remind you to type your name and who you're representing in the chat box if you are not a BIE, if you're not BIE personnel. If you'd like to go back and look at the slideshow again, if you'd like to go and look at the full version of the proposed rule from the BIE webpage, you're welcome to review those documents again, maybe think about it and write your comments. You still have time to submit recommendations. The deadline is August 26th. Are there any slides that you would like to have reviewed?
Okay, Maureen, this is Clint. Let's give it a couple minutes past 4 p.m. Eastern, and we'll see if anybody logs on at the top of the hour. If not, we'll adjourn, but let's give it about 5 minutes. And if people have questions between now and then, they can ask them, and we'll continue if they do have questions or comments. But otherwise, about 4:03 Eastern Time, we'll adjourn.
All right.
Okay, Maureen, maybe you want to go over the deadlines and next steps again, and then I'll close out.
Sure. Comments on the proposed rule are due August 26th of this year. You can email your comments to consultation@bia.gov. You can also go to the regulations.gov web link, search for JOM, and submit comments. The next steps are, once the deadline passes, August 26th for comments, then Interior will review the comments, make changes as appropriate. A final rule will be published in the Federal Register, and a final rule will not become effective for at least 30 days after it's published. And again, the final rule is due December 31st, 2019.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank everyone for participating today and joining the call to help improve the program. If you have further questions or comments, please submit those for the record before the date that Maureen just mentioned. And on behalf of the BIE and the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, we appreciate your participation and look forward to working together and utilizing your comments to improve the program. Have a great day.
Thank you.